Welcome back to the Audible Angle. We are back with another Bridge Up special, Bridge Up Brewing. We're keeping it local. Irby's got the sign. I should have put on the hat now that I look at myself. First time I looked at myself today, realized I don't have my Bridge Up hat on, but I'm thinking about them. We are killing two birds with one stone here today. You might remember us from such episodes as the build-up to UW River Falls Championship. You might remember us interviewing Carthage College Athletic Director Ryan Kane. We are back with Coach Jesse Tinney. I think we'll just go with Coach. That's what we usually end up going with. So we got Coach from UW-Platteville, the Pioneers head soccer coach. He's been there, I think, fifth season. Been there a little while. Started off as an assistant. Built up a couple years in a row, making the NCAA tournament. So this is another successful program, and we're going to get into a number of topics. You know, people think spring ball, Alabama spring ball, they got it on ESPN now. A little news flash for everybody. The other fall sports have a spring program as well. Equally important and probably more entertaining if we're all being honest with each other. I mentioned two birds with one stone. We have had some viewer feedback. They'd like younger, more attractive dudes on the video, so we went ahead and got a much younger, fitter representative for the show. Hailing, fellow collegiate athlete, hailing from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. We're going to start off with a very serious question. And, Coach, can you gauge your overall excitement welcoming back fellow Pittsburgh guy Mike McCarthy, head coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers? Is the entire state abuzz?
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like it's a very Pittsburgh thing to do, right? To hire a guy with Pittsburgh roots. It's kind of what we do, I feel like. But he's got my full support. I think typically for those people outside of Pittsburgh, we typically go for kind of like a younger, kind of higher, and kind of roll with them for a number of years, where I think Mike McCarthy, obviously much more experience. He's been in the league, had some success. So I think it'll be interesting. I'm excited. Hopefully our offense looks a little bit more potent than it has in the last few years, but we'll see what happens come August, come September.
I think interesting is a good word to describe it. He does have offensive chops, as Packer fans, and I guess Druzy is a Viking fan, but who cares? We saw a lot of Mike McCarthy, and I think the Pittsburgh fan base probably can relate a little bit. Mike Tomlin, great coach, but at some point over a long period of time, it's time for a change, and that's kind of how it was with McCarthy in Green Bay. It wasn't like there was prolonged periods of without success. They were still successful, and it got to be time. But I'm sure he's rejuvenated after a stop in Dallas. He's coming home. Pittsburgh Steelers, AFC North champions. Lock it in now. If you find a place to legally wager, you can lock that in anytime. Our sponsors are not DraftKings or any of those, but, find a friend. Irby, you're one of our soccer experts, old guy soccer expert. Lead us off here on getting more information.
Coach, I appreciate you coming on the show today, spending a little time with us Jamokes. But I'm interested to hear, Dilly kind of touched on some of your NCAA tournament successes. I think 2 years ago you guys made it all the way to the Sweet 16, which was a great win there for you. Talk to me about the biggest challenge at your level to create a consistent NCAA contender year in and year out. I mean, we're sitting knee deep here. I think we're going to talk a little bit about some similarities with D1 and it's March Madness. But talk to me about some of the challenges that you have to create that NCAA team.
Yeah, sure. No, it's a good question. I think there's multiple things that we face as coaches when you're trying to build a program. And when I think of building a program, I think of you're recruiting, you're developing, trying to maintain some things for, in some sake. So I think for us over the years, the biggest challenge is to keep up with, everything recruiting. As a younger coach, I think I've I listen to podcasts, I read books, I talk to other coaches, I try to find the secret recipe, right, to win games and put the team in the best position. And unfortunately, I don't think there's any common denominator, right? Or if there was some secret, I think everyone would be doing it. But the closest thing I could find is just like whoever has the better players at the end of the day is probably going to be the most successful. I would say it is a challenge for us. It's a challenge for everyone to bring in the best people, best players, but it's something that we deal with every day, touching base with recruits or trying to evaluate people in some degree and ultimately get them into our program. So, again, it's a day-to-day thing. It's a big picture thing as well, but it's a point of emphasis that I probably spend 80, 90% of my time on. So for us, it's just trying to find those people and, to do that and to bring them in. I think every school is different and has different appealing factors. So I think, whether it's cost, whether it's, athletic or academic facilities, whether it's academic prestige, whatever it is, you name it, we're always trying to think of ways to market UWP in the best way possible so we can bring in the right people.
Drew, you've got a question then that kind of stems off of those challenges that Coach talked about.
Yeah, Coach. First of all, I echo Irby's sentiments, given some time here to join the angle. And my question was about, and it's probably an obvious question for any college coach at any level, which is the current state of NIL and the transfer portal. Obviously, the transfer portal's been around for a while, but mostly for a long time was kind of an uncommon or a one-time deal with the transfer portal. And now, of course, with NIL in our fifth or sixth year, wherever we are on that, has sort of blown things up across the landscape of college sports. Feel free to tackle this however you want, but maybe just give your thoughts on how you view this current status of NIL and the transfer portal, maybe on a national level, and also possibly how it affects you at a more granular level at your sport in your community.
Sure. Yeah, it's everything everyone's talking about, right, in college athletics, transfer portal, NIL, what they're doing to kind of combat that. So for me, I'd say I'm very lucky. I don't really have to deal too much with the portal, with NIL. We are a Division III institution, so NIL still exists, but to a much lesser extent than what those teams that are playing the March Madness this month, what those guys have to, deal with managing their players and trying to procure them by, paying them X amount of money. So I think it's fortunate for me to just not deal with that. Like we don't, I don't, as far as I know, I don't think any of our guys are dealing with any of the NIL stuff. And I would say as well, like when we recruit, there's never, I never lost a player because they said, hey, coach, I'm going to school XYZ because they're giving me, this much money. So hopefully, knock on wood, it stays like that because I think it makes it easier for myself and our staff. But regarding the transfer portal, I would say on average for us, we probably bring in maybe one transfer a year from the portal, and it's usually not some guy from like the East Coast or something like that. It's usually like a local guy or there's some sort of connection. Maybe like, I recruited them in their initial process. They go to a different school, didn't work out, and they're looking for a new home, that sort of thing. So our team is mostly, just your standard, 18-year-old senior that graduates from high school and is looking to play in college. So again, hopefully that doesn't change. I really don't want to be in a position where we have to replace 7, 8, 9 players at the end of the fall. I mean, that sounds like a nightmare to me. And I think part of my job as a coach is to try to create an experience where they, don't want to leave, whether, on the soccer side, but also outside of soccer too, just to make sure that, they're having fun. And I think that's why recruiting is such a big emphasis on finding the right people, as cliche as it may sound. Like, if you have good people in your program, good people want to be around good people, and ideally, hopefully that's enough for them to stay.
Hey, Coach, I know that you guys are in your spring lead up to your spring season, and one of the surprises I had moving from primarily D1 into D3 is the limitations that you and the program have in Division III with the amount of games you can play. And I'm interested in asking a couple of questions around that. You have the capability of playing one real game in the spring. And I'm interested in you and your staff. Are you looking at that, just having one game in that spring versus Division I for our listeners? They get 5. And do you see that as a hindrance to development for your guys, or how do you kind of look at that? Is it a positive, negative? I'm interested in your perspective.
It's a great question. There's two sides of every story, right? So I think for me, it's a negative. I'd much rather play 5 games than 1, right? That's why guys are here. They want to play in games. They just passed a rule. So when I was playing, a few years ago, well, more than a few years ago now, we only had 16 sessions. That's what it was in the spring, and still 1 game. And then just 2 or 3 years ago, they changed it where you get 24 kind of contact days. We use every single one of them every year. We try to make the most for what we have, but it is, I believe that's one of, I would say, a point of emphasis in kind of the head coaches and just seeing if we can get maybe up to 2, 3, maybe 4 games. The other side of it is just from an administrative standpoint, like, there's other sports going on, so, administrators have to figure out field space. And I think the biggest thing is just, money. If we're going to, go on the road and play, like you gotta pay for the travel, you gotta pay for meals, you gotta, foot the bill for that stuff. And, budgets are tighter than ever in higher ed right now. So I think that's certainly a factor. But for me, I would just say, like, if you can't do it, if you can't afford it, then you just don't play them. But I think they should allow us to give us the option. I think that puts the student athletes first, because ultimately, I'm sure if you surveyed every single soccer player, they'd say, hey, like, we want to play more games. So, hopefully one day that comes into fruition. But for now, we're just taking what we can get and kind of rolling with it.
Yeah, following up, and I agree, right? But following up, you guys just a peek under the covers for our listeners. Plattville does a really good job of kind of joining in and trying to get a couple more contact days there with some competitive stuff. When you do some inter squad stuff, kind of keep them competitive. That's good. The thing that brings me up to it is there's so many good D3 teams in the soccer landscape that are in Wisconsin, in Upper Iowa, in Illinois, that, man, you can drive there and back in a spring game and kind of keep those costs low. So I'm with you. It'd be nice to see those guys. One last question, talking about that spring season, Coach. Is this really kind of a litmus test for you to see how your guys developed over the winter months in the spring? Is that what you're looking for as a coach and a coaching staff?
Yeah, it is. I think me and the staff are always curious to see, how we do against outside competition, right? Because we started last month, end of February. We train roughly 3 days a week, and then our spring game this spring is actually near the end of April, which is kind of when we wrap things up. So, like, we're kind of just like building to it. I wouldn't say though, like, if we perform poorly or if we win 5-0, that it's going to be like, oh man, like, we're going to be good, like, watch out for us. That's why I kind of wish we had more games, because I think we've typically, it's 1 game. I typically play the entire team just to get guys different reps. But I like to move players around because a lot of our guys are pretty versatile. And I don't know if 1 game allows us to do that while trying to get everyone in the game. So, it's tough. It's tough to kind of get that litmus test. And I think myself, and I would speak for, probably a lot of other coaches, are probably in the same boat, where if we had those 2 or 3 extra games, we could probably gauge ourselves a little bit more, and then just kind of figure out, like, what we need to work on or what our biggest needs are. So in the summer, we can kind of game plan and then tackle that as we start in August when the guys report.
I'm going to jump in with a little audible here. I'm going to call an audible and hold Druzy off for another second here. Just talking about spring has me thinking about summer. Do you have the ability to have an ongoing strength, and training and fitness program for guys that stick around in the summertime? Is that a thing for you, or are you sending guys off with the program and most guys come back in August, or is it a little bit of everything?
It's a good question, Dilly. We have a full-time strength staff. They do a ton of work for us. I think they're a huge component to maybe why we've had some success over the last few years, but they take care of everything for our guys immediately once they leave campus for the summer. So I think they email out the training block or training program on a bi-weekly basis. They send it to our new players as well, our incoming guys, so they're on board. And it's everything that needs to get them ready for, obviously, the fall and that campaign, but also our fitness test. So, but our strength staff handles all of that. We have our own strength coach. His name's Kellen. Works with the guys right now, and then he's their point of contact if they have questions or need additional work as well in the summer. So we're pretty squared away. And again, I don't know other programs are like that, but I think, again, he's been a huge part of our success.
All right, Jersey, go ahead. I'll let you back in here.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Coach, I wanted to get your take on the Division III institutions here in the Upper Midwest, namely the MIAC and the WIAC. Growing up in Minnesota, lack of a Division I institution, and quite frankly, that's all I was really familiar with, were the schools here in the Twin Cities and just across the border into Wisconsin. And a lot of my club teammates, nearly all of them actually went to, either a MIAC or a WIAC school, and really some great players and great guys. And I wanted to get your take on, how are those conferences viewed on a national level? It seems like there's a lot of great success there. St. Olaf and Augsburg with some great success. Dilly mentioned the success that you had just a couple years ago. How do you think those conferences are viewed on a national level, and how they stack up?
Sure. No, I think that's a good kind of question as well. Like I'll tell you, Drewsy, I would say Division III soccer, I think it's the home base is kind of more east. I would say like your Ohio's, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, New York, that kind of area is kind of a hotbed. But I think really in recent years, our region specifically in the Midwest, you mentioned the MIAC. The MIAC has been outstanding for the last 2 to 3 years. I mean, St. Olaf won the national championship a few years ago. They just got back to the Final Four. Schools like Augsburg, I think, have been top 25, top 10 consistently last season. St. John's is becoming, I think, more and more competitive by the month. And there's other schools like Gustavus and McAllister. So the list goes on and on. There are some good players, some good programs in the Midwest. And I think the reemergence of the WIAC for men's soccer, I think, is certainly playing a role as well. Like, Eau Claire just started their program, I think, in 2021, and they've already had, a ton of success. Stevens Point is only in their second year, and they made the WIAC final last season. So it's only getting more difficult. And again, our region specifically, Wisconsin, Minnesota, I think has done really well the last 2 to 3 years, obviously locally, but even nationally. So I think, I don't want to speak for coaches ever, but I think teams and programs out east, I think, are starting to take note. There's some serious contenders year in, year out that you probably don't want to match up against when it comes tourney time in November. So hopefully it stays that way, because I really like the competitive environment now. Everyone's so talented. The coaching, I think, is really strong. All the teams seem so organized. So hopefully we keep kind of riding the wave here.
I wanted to jump back quick to you mentioned the full-time strength staff. Do you feel more pressure? You mentioned the WIAC is kind of on the rise in soccer. I imagine a lot of the facilities are shared, the fields and the weight rooms and stuff. We had some other people mention how, just in the era of social media, you can tour 10 different weight rooms in 10 minutes on YouTube. Do you guys feel a little pressure on facilities? Do you have new facilities on board that are helping all the athletes feel like, hey, this is a top-notch place, whether it's, we mentioned St. Olaf, a little bit longer time success. Hey, we got the same facilities. Do you notice that?
Sure. No, I think, I don't know if I feel pressure, but I think there's a very good reason why we're able to kind of draw or attract some of the players that we have, and part of it is just that we have some nice things. And I think that's probably accurate for a lot of other places and programs as well. Like our stadium, for example, I tell this to every recruit when they visit campus. It's an unofficial fact, but our soccer venue, like where our guys play, Ralphie Davis Stadium, to my knowledge, is the biggest venue capacity-wise where Division III soccer is played in the country. There's a few other stadiums that are larger, hold more people, but they're exclusive to football. But I think our stadium is really cool, and I think when you walk through it, you get out to the 50-yard line, people are kind of like in awe that it's a Division III facility, and that's where we get to play our home games. Our weight room, our athletic kind of field house as a whole, I think is pretty nice. They do a very good job, I think, keeping update with like the branding, etc. But schools are putting in new buildings, new facilities every year, it seems like, and it's trying to I think every school is trying to keep up with the Joneses kind of for sake. So I'm sure the leaders of our school are always trying to find ways to update and upkeep everything so we're on par with of course, other schools in the WIAC, but really other schools in the region and country as well. Because I think at the end of the day, it's a huge part of of why kids go to certain schools is just kind of facilities and resources that they offer. Absolutely.
As I stumbled through that question, I forgot to mention that the reason why that came to my mind is because when I first went to the website, you scroll down an inch and you see right there the sports medicine room and Ralph E. Davis Stadium. So that stuff, the facilities are in the forefront right on the website, and they do look great. That is a good looking stadium.
Yeah, Coach. Obviously talking soccer here today, but wanted to bring it maybe to more of a human level and just kind of an open-ended question here on the most rewarding aspect of being a head coach at UW-Platteville, whether it's the city in the community and the university. And then I was just thinking about it's probably a lot different being a student athlete today than it was 15 or 20 years ago, and there's probably so much more to being a head coach than there was. And just talk about what you find most rewarding in your role.
Sure. Wow. Okay. Yeah, I think there's a lot of things. I think I talk about it a lot at our banquet. I mean, I think the coolest part of my role or my job is simply just seeing the guys kind of grow and develop. And I know it's a little bit cliche, but it's very cool when you kind of recruit a kid. He's in his later kind of back end high school years, you get to meet him, his family, and get to know him on some level. And then you bring him into your program, and then you get to see him kind of just become a better person, become a better player. Through the 4 or 5 years they're here. I think that's really cool. And I've been here long enough now where I'm just starting to have some of the guys that I was able to coach and work with kind of in my first year here. They're some of those guys are getting engaged. Some of those guys are already, transitioning jobs, and you just kind of get to, see them grow up a little bit. So I think by far that's the coolest thing about the job. As much as I love soccer, and I do love soccer probably more than most people, I think one of the things I love is just meeting like good, down to earth people. Like I love that when we get a family on campus, and I can tell within the first 10 minutes that, the recruit's got his head on straight. He comes from a good family, and I start to envision them, being with us for the next few years. So, by far the coolest part of the job.
I just want to address the little shock on my face I had there. Didn't know Druzy was going into the bag of feelings and emotional and inspirational questions there. That's stay in your lane, man. You're the third panelist on here. Let's just leave the sensitive stuff to the sensitive guys, please.
Hey,
Roger.
watch yourself, Dilly. You know that Druzy's probably got 1 or 2 listeners that he's got on the hook that he's trying to impress of the female persuasion. So he's always angling that game. Coach, as we get into March Madness here, and we just did 2 big episodes on the Audible angle on March Madness on the basketball side, and a big thing is everybody's talking about net rankings and the Division I level, and was it a quad 1 win, and Miami of Ohio didn't even play a quad 1 win or game. I know in Division III it's not called that. It's called NPI, but they did add that a few years back. That can get you back in. I want to make our listeners kind of familiarized with NPI, but I want to kind of pick your brain on how you balance schedule making to best set your team up for an NCAA bid if, God forbid, you don't get that auto bid by winning the WIAC. How do you what thoughts are you going in the off season as you clear up that schedule?
Sure. Scheduling is the most tedious and one of the most challenging aspects of the job. I think you can really set yourself up for success just by how you schedule, or set yourself up for a potential disaster. When we went to the Sweet 16 a couple years ago, which was the first year they actually implemented the NPI, our schedule, we were very lucky. I think our schedule was kind of more catered to that system to be successful, and we took full advantage of it by obviously doing well. So we were able to kind of climb and be higher up in the rankings and poise ourselves to do well. But it's very interesting how it came about. It was like it was just kind of a random day that they sent out like an email, like the NCAA notified the coaches that said, hey, we're switching systems on how you qualify for the NCAA tournament, with zero kind of like consultation with us, anyone related to the sport. So it certainly caught people off guard. And I remember it was certainly an uproar. It was pretty dramatic. And I remember they hosted kind of like a Zoom call over the summer going into the 2024 season, it was like, 30, 60 minutes on, a quick brush up rundown of the new system. And it still, I think, opened up more questions than there were answers. So people were obviously a little bit upset, but I still think we're still trying to figure out the best practices of it comparative to the last system, which I preferred our previous setup before, because I think that was a better system to get better teams into the big dance essentially. But there's pros and cons to each system, just like anything else. So for me, I think it's much more catered to winning games as opposed to strength of schedule. I think that's my biggest gripe with it is, you can win a lot of games but have a low strength of schedule, and that can kind of push you up in the rankings. Where in years past, you can win a ton of games like the University of Miami, Ohio, but if you're not playing anyone, it's going to be pretty damn tough to get yourself a profile to get into the selection for show, come November. So, but it takes the human element out of it. I know that was a big thing with people, like, the political side of it, like why should one team get, in over the other, and that's a conversation now. It's it's down to just data. So I can go on and on about it, but that's the gist of it.
Hey, Coach, wanted to ask you a little bit about recruiting and maybe some of the challenges that you go through, or just general thoughts on recruiting, such as, how far do you cast your net, challenges on trying to see a kid play. You've already addressed a little bit of the positives, negatives of NIL, but maybe just walk us through, recruiting seasons upon you. What are the things you're looking at? What are some of the barriers you have to get through to get that taken care of?
Yeah, we're kind of in the thick of it right now. We're just starting to, I'd say, shift our focus to, I would say, to like the current juniors in high school. We're kind of finishing or wrapping up with our current senior class here, hopefully sooner rather than later. I think for us, like, we recruit mostly Midwest. We've had one international player in the last 4 or 5 years, and he was from Canada. So I feel like he doesn't even count.
Fair. Very fair. Very fair.
So it's Wisconsin, Illinois, a little bit of Minnesota, and a little bit of Iowa, and that pretty much makes up the roster. We have a few more outliers. Like, we've had a few players from Colorado. We had the guy from Canada that I mentioned, and then we have a couple guys from, like, the Missouri area, closer to Kansas City. But that's the team. So Illinois and Wisconsin are certainly the two biggest states that we pull from. I would say anywhere in Madison, Milwaukee, or up north, of course. And then when I speak to Illinois, it's mostly like Chicago suburbs, Chicagoland. Like, that's where we're hitting. So I don't think this cycle will be any different. That'll be kind of what we're leaning on. I think there's certain teams and certain clubs that we usually try to monitor more than others, just because we know the quality of players that usually come from there. But the biggest challenge for me is I've really tried to bring the roster size down since I've taken over. I think when I took over, I inherited a group of right around 41, 42. So for the past few years, without trying to sacrifice some of our depth, just to try to like bring in or be a little bit more selective about some of the players that we bring in. So the hardest part for me is when you have a really good player, a really good person, typically, if you find someone like that, they have a lot of other options, right? That's just how it is. When you're good at your job, there's other people after you. So for me, I have to sacrifice, like, do we wait on some of these players? Because if we need to bring in a center mid, and we have our top choice, but he's, between us and 4 other schools, I never know if, like, he's going to end up here or not. So I have to come up with option B and C and try to keep them on board or try to find them in the first place, because we might need that position. So I'm not sure if that makes sense, but that's probably the biggest and most challenging thing for me, because what happens is if you just offer, 7 players that play that position and then 5 of them say yes, then you have too many. And that's how guys become unhappy. That's how you increase the roster size, and that's just tougher for me to manage. So that's something that we're actively trying to navigate. I think we've done really well this cycle. I think it worked out very, very nicely. Hopefully we can keep it rolling, though, because it can get a little dicey some years.
You kind of mentioned roster construction a little bit there. This is, relying on the internet a little bit, but you have 9 or 10 seniors on their way on to bigger and better things in life. What's the overall state of the team as we look at spring and incoming recruits for the fall? Are things pretty set at this point already? Are you filling in that roster with mainly high school kids coming in, or is there a little bit of mix there?
We are mostly. I don't know if we'll bring the transfer this cycle. The transfer portal will kind of heat back up a little bit as summer comes to, gets here in May. The class, is mostly done. We have 8 players committed. Excuse me, we have a JUCO transfer, and then we have 7 just kind of guys coming out of high school. So the class is almost done. We're just waiting on 1 or 2 more guys to hear back from them, and we'll kind of go from there. But the squad is good. As you mentioned, we just lost about 9 or 10 seniors, and those are pretty prominent guys within our program throughout their career. So I would say it's a pretty impactful group. The class that we brought in this year was probably one of the largest classes that we've had, but we've probably lost about 21 to 22 players over the last 2 years, which is a ton. So to kind of combat that, we brought in a bigger class. The idea was that those guys can kind of come in, and if they're ready, they can compete and play. But we do have those 9 seniors. But the idea was, they can kind of learn from that group, prepare themselves. That way, I'm not relying on, 18-year-old freshmen to kind of come in and play right away. They get a year to kind of learn and get their bearings. And then hopefully, come this next fall, they're ready to go. But we have some talented guys. I think we've used 8 sessions so far, and I think the group's been done really well so far. So I can already see some of the younger guys kind of stepping up and filling the shoes of those 9 guys that are graduating. So it's been kind of cool to watch, but we still have a long way to go. When you bring in new players, I think that always kind of shakes things up too, which is good. So, but I think we're in a good spot. Knock on wood.
Coach, I like that. Nice question, Dilly. You get a B- for this episode, at least that question. Coach, I kind of want to understand how you're using this. Your staff is using the spring season. Is it a tactical? I know you get 24 contact days. You said you're about a third the way through, right? Sitting in middle of March, which is a great timing, right? Because you're kind of going into that next 45 days before your game. How are you using it? Is it just a reason to get the guys, cohesion? Is it tactical? Is it to kind of see that next step, dude? What kind of things are you and your staff looking at?
That's a fantastic question. I think that's something that we sit down with, and we probably already start thinking about it whenever our season ends in the fall. But, we sit down and we kind of go over just some bullet points and kind of what we want to work on in the spring. There's a lot of overlap between the years, but there's always a few different, just differences kind of year to year. For us, with just the number of guys leaving over the last 2 years, again, a lot of our prominent players, it's more so just kind of putting these guys to the gauntlet and just making sure that they're ready mentally, physically for the fall season, because we are now, I would say, a younger team. The past few years, we've been an older team. So it's been really intense. Like, we've been getting after it. Our strength staff, I dialogue with them weekly, sometimes daily. And our kind of goal is just to make sure that these guys are ready to go and try to get as much buy-in as we can, so we can hit, or carry the momentum into the fall and just hit the ground rolling. So I wouldn't say it's not as much tactical. Like, we'll do some tactical things, but it's mostly just kind of develop, some principles of the play. The X's O's are important, but I think really I just want to make sure the guys have some fight and bite to them, whether we're doing something defensively or offensively. And then just seeing who's gotten better over the last few months, because we've already talked about it. I'm very limited in what I can do, I would say, when our season ends up until, end of February, beginning of March. So I'm always curious to see, who's been putting in work and and how that looks, or who, how that showcases amongst some of the guys. So, we're always just kind of watching and evaluating and seeing who's going to be maybe the front runners to, maybe be a starter, or what kind of role some guys will have come fall.
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting little compressed season to kind of get you through the summer. I know Dilly's chomping at the bit here to ask something that's on his brain. I'm going to hold him up here. I've got another question, some things that happen here in the off season. WIAC's getting another person in the program, right? Another school's coming in. UW-Oshkosh. Drew, you and I had a run-in with the Oshkosh boys back when they had some national championship run. UW-Green Bay, when we played, Coach, actually played Oshkosh. They gave us a run, unfortunately. I think we ended up tying them, Drew. You would know. You're the human mind lock. How is that going to change? And the other question I had, so they're not coming in until the 27 season, I believe, right? They have to wait one more season, and then they're in. So that's going to add kind of I'm going to call it local. I'm in Green Bay, so that's local for me. Good news for me. I get to go to another closer game. I don't have to drive 3.5 hours for a home game anymore, or this is a home away from home. But talk to me about Oshkosh joining, and then is there zero chance that UW Superior ever goes in the WIAC because they're basically in Timbuktu?
Well, I think, yeah, for Superior, I don't know, to be honest with you. I think they'll stay in with the UMAC or wherever they're in. I think they're very successful there. At least their men's soccer program is. I think they seem to win that conference every year. So if I was them, I would just stay in there, right? If it's not broke, don't fix it. For Oshkosh, they were playing in the Final Four in like 2012, 2013, or whenever that was. So I expect them to follow suit with the other WIAC schools and become very good very quickly. I think what I look at for a lot of schools is just how are both men's and women's sports at other institutions, and Oshkosh seems to be good at just about everything. So I think give them 2-3 years if they even need that. I'm sure they'll make things pretty competitive. Oshkosh is a cool town, good sports culture, which I just kind of mentioned. So to me, I think they already have a pretty good draw, and I'm sure there's going to be some people wanting to be in the public sector, good reputation. I'm sure they'll find someone as well. It's a good coach and is ready to roll. So yeah, we're we might be in for it in 2027, but I think it's good. Just the league keeps growing, makes it more competitive, which I talked about earlier. So yeah, I'm pumped. For it.
It's great to see. Just a final thought here. It's great to see the WIAC getting better and bigger, right? The WIAC is strong. There's not a day that you can take off, obviously, in your regular season when you get conference time. With Stevens Point coming in, Oshkosh, what Eau Claire has done for years. Well, that's a big rivalry for you. We're going to get over the hump this year, Coach. I feel it. Dilly, you've got a question. You've been kind of texting me like crazy. What do you got?
Well, you guys confused me a little bit here, and this is a little off topic, further off topic than I planned to go. UW Oshkosh, they used to have a soccer program, then they didn't? But they were still good enough to take it to you and Druzy when you're at the big boy UWGB school?
Hey, man, here's the deal. Druzy and I came in with like 36 other freshmen because the coach left like 2 days before we started. So we got a super pass to go in and play D1. D1 players are not the same anymore. Look at our stature. We'd probably be all conference, maybe all region, Drew. Even today, D1. Let's be honest.
It was a low bar that year, Dilly. Low bar.
A low bar? Okay. I was a little confused, but now the program's back and they're entering the WIAC.
2027, baby.
Fresh start. Moving on, it's a similar level to the WIAC. We mentioned just briefly, basically the word Canada came up. We all were a little repulsed by the word Canada. I got a couple other repulsive sounding words that I'm going to say here. Paraguay, Australia, UEFA Playoff C winner, who gives a bleep, whichever country makes it through. Do any of them stand a chance against the U.S. men's national team in the upcoming World Cup? Let's bring it up a level to the international level. Coach, we'll start with you. Does anyone have a chance, at least maybe in the group, against the U.S. men's national team?
I'm a strong believer that anything can happen in tournament play. For example, I think it was in 2010, Spain won the World Cup. I think they lost their first game 1-0 in group stage, and they went on to win it. I think that's right. And then I even think when Messi won it with Argentina, I think they dropped to someone in the most recent tournament, and then they went on to win it. So I think the U.S. could lose to anyone. I also think they could probably nick anyone 1-0 on any given day as well. So I'm hoping for the best. I just hope we get out of the group and hopefully put a little bit of run together. So yeah, fingers crossed. Fingers crossed.
Over the years, have you had any, as of course we're USA fans, but did you have any, particular international teams that maybe held on to a little bit for those later stages of the World Cup when the U.S. Perhaps had gotten knocked out or didn't qualify because something called Trinidad and Tobago so we don't have to rehash that match. But
Jeez.
anyone else that you like? You mentioned Messi in Argentina. Are you a secret Brazil guy? Druzy likes Brazilians and Cougars, but any secret fandom secondary teams you'll be watching in the World Cup?
No, I'm boring. I'm sorry, guys. I'm a loyal supporter, so I root for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I'm Pittsburgh. I don't care about anyone else. U.S. is the same way. I mean, I think when Messi won, I think that was cool to see him get the World Cup in the last tournament. At the end of the day, I just want to see 4-4, 8-goal thrillers, and exciting moments. That's about it. But once the U.S. gets knocked out, as long as it's not maybe like a CONCACAF rival like Canada, Mexico, Panama, or whoever else is qualified, I'm fine with it.
It's always fun. It's a time when and I'm like an advanced casual fan. Maybe I'm not really an expert fan, but even when World Cup comes around, it's kind of like the NCAA tournament. A lot of casuals show up. A lot of guys at Thursday at 8 a.m. at the bar for a U.S. men's national team game against a country they couldn't find on a map. But let's all have a good time. Let's have a good World Cup. Let's have a good WIAC season. Let's get back to the NCAA tournament. And I suppose I should ask, any final questions, Druzy or Herbs?
Coach, anybody that you've got on your, I've got one more, Dilly, and this is kind of a reach. Got anybody on the short list that you really want to get after this next season? I'm not trying to give anybody any bulletin board material here, but is there anybody that you're like, man, I saw that our schedule came out here shortly. Is there a team that you're kind of like, I know, and you can skip UW-Eau Claire. No need to go there. We know that that's always that mountain that we want to climb. That's too easy, Coach. You can't use them. But is there somebody else on that schedule that you're like, I circle it come August 1st. I want to get them in the fall. Is there a team that's coming up schedule that you're really looking forward to?
Yeah, I mean, I want to beat everyone at the end of the day. I think the guys, we have like kind of like a goals meeting that we do in the off season, talk about what we want. And I think the guys really just want to kind of conquer the WIAC this year. I mean, we've been to the tournament a few times, which has been amazing, but I think, I don't think we've won like any true like silverware in our 60-year existence as a program. So I think the guys really want to win, whether it's regular season or conference tournament, just so we can check that box. I'll tell you this, we do have, I think, an interesting first three games of the season. For example, first game of the season, we're hosting McAllister. It's just coming off a WIAC tournament championship. They made the Sweet 16. They were super consistent, super solid last year, so I think that'll be a huge test for us just to, on day one, just to see how we do at home. And then we're actually going to Pittsburgh, again, that's where I'm from, to play a team, and then a day or two later, we're playing another team kind of across the border in Ohio on the way back to Wisconsin. So I think those first three games I'm going to be really up for, especially as we get back out east, just because we're investing a lot to kind of get out there. And I've already told the guys, like, we're going out there to do absolutely everything we can to come away with our desired results. So I think those first three games for us will be very critical and hopefully set the tone for the rest of the year.
I mean,
I heard that rumor about that Mount Union matchup in Pittsburgh there. He has some close ties to Mount Union, I've heard in the past, and of course, family there. Is there any chance, is there going to be any time in the day or evening after the match, slide out for a Miller Sharp or a O'Doul's or two with some family or friends or fellow alumni?
I think there'll be some time. We're going to leave on, I think, a Wednesday. We're going to get there late Wednesday night. We play Friday and Sunday. And Friday we're playing in Pittsburgh. The plan is to play, I think that game will be in the evening. But then Saturday is like we'll do all the touristy stuff. So you guys are more than welcome to come. I've been trying to get the parents on board and some of the alumni. So I think it'll be really cool. I think the players will love it as well, just because, class, I think that's the first week class, which is unfortunate, but they're not, they shouldn't be too stressed or have a ton of assignments. So they should be able to kind of just focus on the, on the games, of course, but also just like get to explore, right? That's two destinations that we don't normally get to go out to, PA and Ohio. So I'm sure there's going to be moments where you can get some icy light, go visit Permanis, some Pittsburgh staples for the parents and alumni. So yeah, should be a great trip.
About that NPI too, Coach. If you come out the right way in those first 3 games, you're setting yourself up well, kind of going into the season to be if things don't work out. And I really think that I'm glad to hear that the team internal is saying the WIAC or bust this year. I think that's what it's going to take to get over the hump. We have to have a focused squad there. But that really could set you up well for an NPI at-large bid if you get some W's like your plan is.
Yeah, I think if we can go 3-0, which is much easier said than done, just the 3 teams we're playing against. Yeah, we should be up there in the early season rankings, which would be nice. I think anytime we've had some strong years here, we've always kind of started out really well. And I think as long as momentum's such a big thing. I think if we can just get out the door with a couple wins and just kind of ride that, I think that's going to set us up for another good campaign. But we'll see what happens. It's going to be tough.
I can vouch for Pittsburgh. I've been there on a work trip or two. Had a great time. It was a solo work trip. Went to a Pittsburgh Pirates game by myself. Meandered around a little bit. It was a good time. Druzy doesn't leave South St. Paul very often. What do you think, Druzy?
Sounds like maybe we got to start planning a road trip, and I'll start the Google on Pittsburgh Townie Taverns here right as soon as we wrap this version of the Angle up.
Looking for more sponsors, Drew. Let's get out there. I'm taking a trip, but I'm not driving with you two, Jamokes. I'm flying. Enough of this.
Yeah, I was going to say, road trip as in to the airport. We're old men. We can't, how many times you'd have to stop to go to the bathroom? Come on.
So figure of speech, guys. Figure of speech.
Coach, any parting words for WIAC competitors? Anybody you want to put on blast?
No, we're going to stay in our lane. We don't want to put anyone on blast. We don't want to put a target on our back. The WIAC's only getting stronger. We are going to have our work cut out for us. So we're taking it one day at a time here. I know, again, that sounds, cliche coaches speak, but that's truly what we're doing and sticking to it.
All right, you heard it here first. Coach is guaranteeing a WIAC championship, just like he said. That's great. That's perfect.
Undefeated all the way through. USA wins the World Cup. Mount Union going down 5-0, and then they got to buy all the parents' beers. Oh, my gosh. Pretty good deal. And friends of parents, too. Me and Druzy, too.
It's kicked out of the game at Mount Union. But other than that,
shouldn't be any problem. Thanks for all the time tonight, Coach. And hopefully we'll buy each other beers. Us 3 will. And then we'll buy you whatever you want in maybe Pittsburgh. Maybe it's Oshkosh. Maybe it's one of these games we'll get out to.
Well, there's a couple games close to you. I think we don't go to River Falls this year, but I think we're out at Stout, I believe, right? Aren't we at Stout, maybe? That's close.
Stout. Red Stout, yeah.
Thanks,
so
Coach.
That'd be a road trip, Druzy. That's a drive.
Yep.
All right, take care, guys.
Thanks, Coach. Good stuff.
Peace.
Thanks,
hey,
guys.
Coach, stay on.
Yep. Dilly, hit the stop button. All right, here we go.